Welcome to Sabby Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have a special guest with me tonight. He is running for U.S. Senate through the Green Party, and he's from the state of North Carolina. Everyone, please give a huge welcome to Matthew Hoh. Matthew, thank you so much for coming back.
Hey, Sabrina. Thanks for having me here.
So Matthew, I know you have some good news for us, but for people who are not aware, can you please explain to everyone what did the Democratic Party in North Carolina do after you received the required amount of signatures to get onto the ballot?
Right. So to get onto the ballot as a North Carolina Green Party, we had to go out and collect signatures. We did that. We exceeded by 160% the required number that we needed. We had those signatures validated. We met all the deadlines. We did everything procedurally correct. And after we turned them into the State Board of Elections to be certified, we were told that we were under investigation for fraud. And so we cooperated with the State Board of Elections. We knew that there was no fraud, but it was a delaying tactic. And at the very last day in June, the deadline was July 1st to be certified, to be put on the ballot. The State Board of Elections, in a 3-2 partisan decision, 3 Democrats versus 2 Republicans, voted to not certify us because there was the possibility of fraud. They then took another month to investigate. And in the meantime, we filed a lawsuit in federal court. And what happened is that this past week, the State Board of Elections met again, and they unanimously certified us. All Democrats, all Republicans voted for us, because after more than 2 months of an investigation into our fraud, or our supposed or alleged fraud, they weren't able to show anything because we didn't commit fraud. But for 2 months, they denied us a place on the ballot, and then they smeared us. They would say things, Sabrina, like there is a universe of fraud occurring here, or thousands of blatant forgeries, and without any evidence, without any merit. And so we had sued, but because the State Board of Elections certified us before we were able to have our hearing in court, that basically rendered our lawsuit moot. And then on Friday, the judge in our federal suit, he ruled and placed myself and the other Green Party candidate, Michael Trudeau, on the ballot for November because we had this July 1st deadline issue. This is what the Democrats did via the State Board of Elections. On a parallel front, the Democratic Party, not just the North Carolina Democratic Party, but the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Chuck Schumer's outfit, from the very get-go, from as soon as we turned our signatures on, they opposed us. They filed complaints against us. They sent people around impersonating Green Party and State Board of Elections officials on the phone and text, going to people's homes, trying to get people to remove their signatures. They were saying we had committed fraud, all these types of things in a coordinated effort between the Democratic Party and the State Board of Elections to keep us off the ballot. Why do I feel comfortable saying that? Because if you look who the head of both the North Carolina government is, as well as the head of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and someone whose name keeps being dropped for president in 2024, 2028, it's Roy Cooper, the Democratic governor of North Carolina. Just to make sure people understand why I'm so at ease criticizing Cooper in this manner, if people are following the story of the Democrats putting $45 million into Republican primaries to boost the worst of the Republicans, boost the Trumpers, the election deniers, those grotesque thugs who want to be in office, Roy Cooper's the head of the Democratic Governors Association, who has been putting that tens of millions of dollars into those races. So to think that Roy Cooper's hands are clean, come on. So we had a judge rule in our favor. We are now on the ballot. We are still facing, we still have some obstacles though, Sabrina, because the North Carolina Democratic Party has filed a state lawsuit to try and keep us off the ballot, to try and block us that way. And meanwhile, an appeal has been filed in federal court against the federal judge, against the judge's decision that was issued on Friday. So we still have 2 lawsuits that we are contending with. But as of right now, myself and Michael Trudeau are on the ballot for the Green Party in November, and voters here in North Carolina have a choice for, an option to vote for someone who's for healthcare for all, who's for ending student debt, right? Who's in favor of annually adjusted living wages, who is in favor of rent control and banning corporations from buying homes. So we're in a good spot right now, but we're still in a fight. But it's a fight we're happy to have because we keep winning.
I have a question. I know I saw the video where Democrats from North Carolina were going to people's homes as well, too, asking them if they intended to sign. Like, obviously, obviously they did. Right. But I'm curious, do you know if the Republican Party in North Carolina was also doing that, or was it only the Democratic Party?
It was only the Democratic Party. If we were the Libertarians, they would have been doing that. That's for sure. I mean, it's just two sides of the same coin. I mean, that's the one of the things that makes the two-party system so corrupt, so undemocratic, right? So harmful, is that anything one does, the other opposes. And that if one thinks, if the Republicans think there's a benefit to doing something, the Democrats will oppose it, and vice versa. So it really was just symptomatic of what we're fighting against, of why we're trying to create a multi-party democracy, why we're trying to bring about more parties, more independent candidates, more grassroots movement, giving voters choice, allowing voters to vote on issues, voting on their beliefs and principles, their conscience, and not participating in this identity politics, red versus blue, lesser of two evils type scheme that we've had for way too long.
And one thing I want to say, too, you hear oftentimes, I've heard this from Democrats and Republicans, that we shouldn't take third parties seriously or independent candidates seriously. But if they didn't consider them to be an issue, they wouldn't go to these lengths that they're going to right now to try to remove someone like Matthew. See, this is the thing. Like, they say that we need to protect our democracy per se, but everything that they're doing behind the scenes, and like Matthew, obviously, I'm not glad this happened to you. But I will say that because this happened to you, I think it's brought more attention to this, because I feel like a lot of people didn't realize this kind of thing was going on. So it's like they say they want a real democracy, but at the same time, behind the scenes, they're the ones undermining the so-called democracy that we have in this country today.
Well, this validates what we've been saying. This validates what you've been saying, Sabrina. This validates what people all throughout the country say and believe. There's a poll last year, 85% of Americans want major restructuring of our electoral system. They want that because they know it's not just broken, but it's corrupt and it's harmful. It's hurting us. It's hurting our people. I mean, why did the Democrats not want us on the ballot? Why would the Republicans not want the Libertarians on the ballot or whoever? It's because we threaten their donors. Like, we are going to represent people who otherwise are not going to be represented this November. And we are going to represent them by pushing issues like single payer health insurance, by pushing, living wages, ending the war on drugs, real action on the climate. Right. I mean, those things are a threat to the profits of the donors that support both the Republicans and the Democrats. And that's why they want off the ballot. That's why they don't want us participating. That's why they don't want voters to have a choice. They don't want that competition because we provide much better options.
That's right. And you also show them that it can be done on the grassroots level. Right. And that's something that they don't want people to see, that it can be done that way. I have a question in reference to other people that have run through the Green Party. Have you had a chance to talk to people like Jill Stein as well? Because I know Jill Stein at one point, I think she may still have this lawsuit, but I know at one point she had a lawsuit as well. Similar situation. I know she showed up to debate and they wouldn't let Jill Stein debate.
Oh, they basically locked her away in a warehouse. They arrested her and put her, incommunicado for the entire length of the debate. So she couldn't even tweet about it or do whatever. No, this was expected. Look, you wade into the alligator pond, you're going to get bit. We were expecting this. Were we expecting exactly what they did? I don't think so. But were they going to do everything they could to block us, to sabotage us? And there's probably things that they did that we are not aware of yet. And they're going to do more. Right. They're going to do everything they can up until November 8th to keep us out of the election. And we're confident, too, that after November 8th, they're still going to come after us and try and kick us off the ballot for 2024. They are desperate to protect what they have. They know they offer nothing to the voters. They know they offer nothing to our communities, that the only thing they can do is serve the interests of the corporations and the banks and the wealthy, and that's what they're going to protect. And so in Jill's case, Jill is being punished for having temerity to run in 2012 and 2016 and offer health care for all, right? Offer real solutions for working families that both parties don't want. And so she is being punished. She's being made an example of. I think in many ways that's what they hoped would happen here, that we would go through great lengths, exhaust ourselves, use up all our resources just to get on the ballot, because petitioning is so intensive. It takes up all your time, all your money, all your effort, all your attention. All you can do is just go out there and collect signatures. You can't really campaign for months. I mean, you're out there canvassing, but it's not exactly what you want to be doing. And then they hit us with these lawsuits. They hit us with the State Board of Elections, not certifying us and spreading rumors about us and allegations that were completely untrue, that we were committing fraud. You know, they do this to make an example of like, okay, you want to run against this. Well, how are you going to get through it all? Because we're going to throw everything we have, not just the resources of the Democratic Party, but the resources of the state. So that's what we were up against. And we were happy for the fight. This was the fight that we wanted. Would we have wanted things to go differently? Would we want to be in control of our campaign, set our own narrative? Absolutely. But look, I am happy to be fighting these Goliaths right now. We are in a David versus Goliath situation here against both the state and the Democratic Party. I'm happy to fight the Republican Party too, because to hell with them as well. You know, so but the idea that we are up against Leviathan here, that we are, if you go back, one of the things that influences me so much, and something that influenced me when I was a kid in high school reading it, was Martin Luther King's comment that compassion is not flipping a coin to a beggar, but it's tearing down the edifice that creates beggars. And that's what we're up against here. We're up against the edifice. And so we're excited for the fight. We're happy for the fight. It proves our point. It validates us. We've been vindicated over and over again, and we're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep winning.
What do you say to people that say that third-party candidates can't win? And I ask this question because I can point out third-party candidates that have won, and then people will say, well, that's only on the local level. But I don't think we should discuss local politics as though it doesn't matter. I think local politics are very important. I'm actually going to be talking to a gentleman, Peter Schwartzman, actually just won a mayor race in Illinois, and he ran through the Green Party. Like, it's just, so I would tell people that, you know, Greens are winning on the local level. And the reason why I think they're not getting that same, I would say, energy on the national level is because of the things that they did to people like Jill Stein. The media smears them obviously very heavily, or they don't talk about them at all. So what do you say to people when they make that comment that third-party candidates can't win?
Well, I mean, the Green Party's won. We've had 1,000 wins in the last 20 years, I believe. We currently have about 135 of our people in elected office across the country. We do win on the local level. I mean, the thing that I think not going to surprise anyone is what you run into in terms of money. I mean, just the sheer volume of money and the way money controls our entire political process, including the elections, that's a real impediment when you start talking about not just statewide races, but even local state races, state Senate and state House races. And then, of course, when you start talking about congressional and state Senate and U.S. Senate and presidential races, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars being involved. And, you know, you can't discount that. However, we have to approach this asymmetrically. We have to realize the strengths that we have. We have to realize that we have the moral advantage. We have the advantage of the majority of American people believing, as we do, that we need third parties, that we need a multi-party system. And we have to realize we have the weight of evidence that the two parties, the Democrats and Republicans, have done nothing other than enrich Wall Street and create war and suffering for decades now. And so we have that to our advantage. And I think one of the things as we look forward into how we do this is we continue the momentum, we continue to build. We recognize that it's hard, but this is not going to just appear out of the ground like it's a weed in your garden. I mean, this is something that we have to build. One of the things I'm really excited for, and why I think this is different than it was 10 years ago, is people like you and the platforms you have. We couldn't do this 10 years ago, have this type of conversation. I started doing media about 12 and a half years ago. And you had to go to a studio, or you had to be on a landline and call in. Like there was none of this, you know. I mean, like, and so this technology we have now, and like the courage and the brilliance of people like yourself and a lot of other folks in independent media, like that is the nucleus around which we build our movement. That communication, that education, that information, that coordination, that's how we continue to build this movement, right? And then we tie in labor, we tie in direct action, we tie in community and mutual aid. We do all those things that are necessary, you know, and the political party is just one aspect, right? Just as the political stuff, but it's tied in everything else. And we're all tied in through people like yourself. And that's how we win. We continue to build. We continue to take them on asymmetrically. We do it smartly. We don't run headlong into the edifice or the Leviathan, but we do it smartly and we persevere. And we will make a difference. And there are other things too. One is that you put pressure on the system to change. We keep running multi-party candidates or keep running multiple candidates in a two-party system. It's going to break the system. At some point, we're going to put so much pressure on the system that they will have to bring in ranked choice voting and eventually proportional representation. We keep doing this, it will happen. The other thing too is we keep putting the pressure and they will adopt some of our issues. I don't care if Mitch McConnell is the one who brings us Medicare for all. I really don't care as long as our folks get it. The people who need it get it. And so the idea is that just as the populists and People's Party did in the late 19th century, the progressives and the socialists did in the early 20th century, we put this pressure on the existing parties and eventually they have to adopt some of the things that we're pushing for. Not everything, but they'll adopt some. And so we do those three things. We build, we put the pressure on the system so that it has to reform. And then we force the other parties to adopt some of our key issues. And that's how we win.
That's right. What is your take on politics in North Carolina today? And I ask this question because, I mean, I haven't lived there since high school, but when I lived there, North Carolina was a red state. I know that has changed. I mean, they did vote for Obama in 2008. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, like, what is the take from people today in North Carolina? Would you say that most people are leaning more towards the Democratic Party, or do you think that there's a rise of independence happening in North Carolina as well?
There's a rise of independence, just like everywhere else. Look, we were out there. We collected more than 22,500 signatures. We spoke to probably 50,000 people in the process of doing that. And the desire for something different, for other options, for change. And I hate using the word change, right? We all got so burnt on that term with Obama. You know? So, but that, you know, I don't have but anyway, the idea that what we were met out there with is enthusiasm for something different, right? For other options was palpable. We saw that. People would ask me, what do people talk to you about when you're out there petitioning Ukraine or gas prices? And I said, you know what? Of course, everyone's concerned about cost of living, but what we hear over and over again is just a conversation about something different, about the need for something else. And North Carolina is a purple state, I guess. We'll elect a Democratic governor and a Republican senator in the same election. So I guess, you know, it's split. And there is a difference here. There are rural areas. We have urban areas. We have a lot of people moving here. We have a state that has high tech, but also some very poor and depressed areas, especially on our east and our mountains. You know, so we have a lot of people who are being left behind. And that's who we're talking to. That's who we believe our constituency is. And that's who we want to serve.
Do you feel like sometimes I like to compare Massachusetts to North Carolina because I feel like both cities have like the beach, the city, and the mountains. They're similar in that aspect a little bit. Do you feel like people in rural communities in North Carolina are forgotten about? Because I get that a lot here. And I do feel like people, especially politicians, when they do campaign here, they focus a lot on Boston, Worcester, Springfield, the big cities, but they tend to forget about the people in these rural areas here in Massachusetts where there aren't as many people living there. Do you feel like that same sentiment is happening in North Carolina as well, in like those rural towns?
It certainly is. It certainly is. You know, we have areas in this state that have been left behind. In the last 10 years, as 1 million people moved to North Carolina, half our counties lost population. And those are primarily rural counties, a lot of those counties in the mountains or in the east. These were where manufacturing once was, or agriculture. You know, and so what you've seen, of course, is the manufacturing has been sent overseas, bipartisan consent by both the Democrats and Republicans to do that. And the agriculture has just been consumed by industrial ag, right? By big ag. So the smaller farms that once provided living for dozens of communities throughout North Carolina are gone. So we have these areas that are very depressed, that have been forgotten about, that don't see anyone coming up to them and asking them what's going on here, listening to them, trying to figure out a way to help them. And it's just, the big issue always that people bring up, you hear the Republican, Democrat, broadband, we need to bring broadband and everything else, which absolutely, broadband should be a public utility. It should be treated that way. Everyone should have it, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't understand that, I guess you were sleeping the last 2.5 years, but it's more than that. It's more than that. People are leaving those areas because they have not been left behind, but they've been destroyed through our economic policies. And so it's issues of education, it's issues of resources, it's issues of jobs. It's the war on drugs, because these are communities that are devastated by the opioid crisis. I mean, as well as the mass incarceration. I mean, this is where it occurs. We have 12 overdose deaths a day in North Carolina, and they occur in those rural areas. So it's about getting out there, listening to those folks, understanding what's been done to them in the name of a bipartisan consensus to make North Carolina the best state for business in the nation, which is what CNBC recently tagged North Carolina as the best state for business in the country. And they explained it as being a bipartisan success story. Democrats and Republicans put aside their differences to make North Carolina the best state for business in the country. At the same time, though, as we know, as Oxfam has reported, North Carolina is the worst state in the nation for workers. And so you clearly understand why it's the best state for business. Well, because it's the worst state for workers. And where has it hit the hardest? It's hit the hardest in our rural areas. So I completely agree with what you're saying, Sabrina, about the rural areas, not just they weren't left behind, they were purposely destroyed.
How is it for education in North Carolina now? Like, if I'm not mistaken, teachers in North Carolina cannot unionize, correct?
Correct. We're either the worst or the second worst state for unionization. I think South Carolina beats us out for that title, but it's a distinction without difference, right? Education has been a political football here for the 2 decades that I've known North Carolina. Teachers have been massively underpaid, under-resourced. We have a real issue here with the whole nonsense of school choice. It's a big Republican thing here, this idea of charter schools and all those other things, that will make sure there's a hierarchy for our education for our children. We used to have one of the best state university systems in the country, the UNC system. I think most people recognize as this is something that should be emulated. And in the last 10 or 15 years, it's been overly politicized. And I don't think many people are pointing it at UNC the way they once did. So, yeah, we have a lot of challenges here, and it's been, again, purposeful. And it's been the other side of it is you could say the Republicans have been underfunding education, which they have. The other part, though, is that where we're really seeing some severe problems in our urban or suburban areas where all this population growth is occurring, those are Democrat areas. And those are areas that the Democrats who are in power in those counties and in those cities are letting come in corporation after corporation, giving them massive tax breaks, totaling billions of dollars in order to make sure that Apple or Toyota or whoever will come here. And then because we're giving those things away, we're cheating our school systems. We're allowing more people to move here, and we're not providing the resources to the schools that they need to accommodate that population growth. And worst of all is we're giving these subsidies, these benefits, these giveaways to corporations while people in the community are inundated with a population growth and an under-resourced school system.
That's right. And I often wonder too, like, where does all the money go that comes into the state? And I ask that question because, you have a professional football team. You'll have to remind me. I think the Charlotte Hornets came back. Aren't they the Bobcats now or something like that?
Yeah, we've got the Carolina Hurricanes. Successful NHL franchise. I remember when they came down here. It was '97. The Canes. They used to be the Hartford Whalers, and they came down here, and hockey was foreign. And the newspaper down here had a big insert explaining hockey, you know, and now they're a great team. But it is a successful state. It's a state that is attracting a lot of high technology companies. And in order to do that, the state gives away billions of dollars to them. And the people suffer. Workers suffer. You know, it's not just the population growth and the tax that then comes on our education and our infrastructure, but it's also too just the increased costs. I mean, we allow these people to move in here under the guise of building jobs, which the data on that is sketchy. A lot of times what happens with these sweetheart deals between local municipalities and the state and these corporations is that there are NDAs. So you're supposed to have an understanding that, well, you know, Apple's going to come in and they're going to bring in 2,000 jobs and everyone's going to be happy and it's going to be a boon. Well, when people try and go back 5 years later and see, did this happen? There's an NDA that doesn't allow them to see whether or not they actually hire people or that they just bring in people from the outside, which is ultimately, I think, is what happens with a lot of these jobs. Some of the things that are happening here with these companies coming in are obscene. We're giving more than $1 billion, the state of North Carolina, more than $1 billion to a Vietnamese auto manufacturer that's going to build an electric car. They still haven't built the car yet. They've never built the car. We're going to give them more than $1 billion. The same with this company called Boom, which is going to build the next Concorde supersonic jet. It's only on paper. They haven't built the plane yet, and we're going to give them like $500 million. At the same time, too, the state has a rainy day fund of, I think, close to $2 billion that it refuses to spend on anything. You know, certainly schools would be one place they could do it. There's no Medicaid expansion here. We have we have 1 in 4 adults in North Carolina are in collections for medical debt. 52% of our kids qualify for free school lunches because they're living in or near poverty. 52%. And meanwhile, we're giving away billions of dollars to Apple, which is the second most profitable corporation in the world after the king of Saudi Arabia's personal oil company. And, billions of dollars to Toyota, the most profitable car company in the world. You know, meanwhile, half our school kids qualify for free lunch. So, I mean, the imbalance here, this desire to make North Carolina the best state for business by exploiting, abusing, and grossly underpaying workers is a policy that both Democrats and Republicans have really embraced.
Yes. One thing I want to mention to people, if you go to visit North Carolina, a lot of times you're probably going to Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area or Charlotte, or maybe even Wilmington if you're going towards the beach on the coast. But that's not the entire state. And I feel like those are the areas that are talked about, but you really have to visit other parts of the state and you'll see like those numbers that Matt is talking about. It's the areas that usually are not mentioned. Right. I'm curious, Matt, like, due to like the influx of transplants that have come into New York, or excuse me, not New York, North Carolina.
A lot of them from New York.
Come from New York. That's right. A lot of them from New York. Some people in North Carolina argue that that is actually what has increased the cost of living there. And I want to get your take on that.
It has. It has. There's been for a long time now, North Carolina has beaten Florida in terms of people coming to North Carolina to retire. You know, and then the state has really aggressively pursued technology companies, and now they're trying to they're really pursuing tech manufacturing as well. Again, all of this is talking about through subsidies. And what you've seen is a lot of people come to these areas. Look, the town I live in, Wake Forest, when my brother and sister-in-law moved here in 1998, there were 7,000 people there. Now there's 55,000 of us, close to 60,000. And we are not the fastest growing town in our county. You know, I mean, this has been, I've known this area now for decades, and, you know, people who've lived here much longer have a more real experience than I do with that. I mean, I have folks in my neighborhood where I live who live in their grandparents' homes, who've lived here their entire lives, and they are losing their homes. I've got 2 neighbors, both across the street from me, both bought out of the houses that they were renting. You know, corporations came in, bought their homes, and then they're gone because, you know, in case of the house right here, she was paying about $650, $700 a month, and they jacked it up to $1,300 a month. So people who are getting by, they are being exploited. They're being crushed because these corporations are coming in. They're bringing in people who are displacing. We're having gentrification as like everywhere else, but we also have this issue where corporations are buying homes, and that is drastically, it does two things. One, it ends up forcing people to pay higher rents because they come in and what they do charge for rent is much higher than what was before. And they do it in a mass way where they kind of flood an area. So it artificially rises the prices of rents in those areas. They also do that when they're purchasing the homes as well. They'll concentrate on a neighborhood or an area. And what they'll do then is that they'll buy a bunch of homes, lift the price of homes in the area. Everyone's familiar with the concept of comps, right? You know, so they'll raise the comps in the area, and then they'll start selling off their properties because they've artificially inflated the housing prices in that area. What they're tending to buy are the homes that working families are trying to buy, that like a young, a young couple wants to start out in. And so in my area, it's impossible to find a home for less than $400,000. I know it doesn't sound much to someone who's in San Francisco, maybe, but, you know, for here, what we're experiencing, and this is all the result of policy. This is not the free hand in the market or some BS like that. This is the policy of giving everything away to corporations, allowing them to do what they want, and then letting the people fend for themselves. Everyone's familiar with the term of socialism for the wealthy, rugged individuals from the poor. This is exactly it. And if I can elaborate one step further on this epidemic of corporations buying the homes, I think it's important people understand how this begins, where the genesis is. So in 2009, 2010, 2011, as about 10 million Americans lost their homes in the Great Recession, President Obama refused to bail them out, but they bailed out the banks. The banks took that money. And some of what they did with that money is they started buying those homes that those 10 million families had lost. And that begins this creation of these, ultimately they're bank owned, but these corporations that are buying these homes, again, often entry level working family homes, you know, and this is where it comes back to. This is deliberate policy. The people of, my town, county, state, throughout the country are the ones being exploited in order to make sure that the financialization policies of the last 5 decades continue to be successful and continue to squeeze every little bit amount of money to the top.
There's a question here from Roger Meadows really quick in the chat. I don't see education on your issues page, but do you support it when it comes to financing K through 12 public education, transferring the tax burden from homeowners to the federal government to cover 90% and mandate state pick up 10%?
Yeah, I don't know about the 90-10 thing. Like I specifics, I don't know. It could be 100, could be 80-20, but I agree with that sentiment. I agree with this. How we do our education now. It allows wealthier communities to do much better with their education than poorer communities can do. I mean, that's just the way it works. It is brutal. It enforces a hierarchy, right? It enforces the haves and the have-nots in this country. And I am in favor, education-wise, pre-K all the way up through graduate school. You want to be a rocket scientist, whatever it is. You should have the ability and opportunity to go at no cost, at no direct cost. We all pay for it through our taxes. And that includes every other type of school out there, whether you want to be, whatever it is, vocational trade, we all should have the opportunity to be who we want to be. And if we do that as a nation, that investment, I mean, that type of what that would do to dramatically invigorate our economy. The only other investment I think that would come close to that would be a Medicare for all, healthcare for all, universal healthcare type of system in terms of the spark that it would provide for generations in our country.
Well said. Matthew, 2 other questions for you. One is, we've seen a lot of people, again, like go into Congress and they say they're going to do a lot of things. And then they get there, particularly those that were progressives that went through the Democratic Party. And then they get there and they don't push back, or they just kind of cower to establishment and corporate Democrats. How would you, or what would you do differently if you were in their position?
Right. I mean, look, if I want to do that, I would have run as a Democrat. And I have had the opportunities to do that. I've been a part of a lot of different things in DC that would have allowed me that opportunity to continue or to take part in the grand game that happens in that bubble up there. And I've consistently walked away from it. There's probably something wrong with me that's propelling me back in that direction, right? But look, I'm not going there to be liked or well received. I want to break the system. I want to disrupt it. I want to get healthcare for our people. I want student debt and medical debt and a lot of consumer debt to be canceled. I want to right the wrong that's been done for, gosh, I mean, we talk about centuries of wrong that's been done, but just for make it easier, the last 5 decades. So the stuff from the Nixon administration, the war on drugs, the financialization policies, all those neoliberal grifts that have occurred for decades now. I want to right those wrongs because I see it in the people I love. I have people I love who can't afford healthcare, who have to check their banking account before they go to the doctor. I just talking about my neighbors who are losing their homes because the system is rigged against them. It's meant to make sure that corporations are allowed to buy homes. People aren't. I mean, so it's those types of things that this is why I'm doing this. I have a genuine hate. And I want to have a policy. I want to have a platform. I want to have a campaign built around compassion and love. But unfortunately, I keep coming back to this anger and this hate. And maybe that's a lot to do with the wars I was in and the lack of accountability for those, the deaths I've seen. Again, I've had, I keep coming back to the opioid overdoses. The number of people I know who've died from opioid overdose, and we're doing nothing about it other than continuing to criminalize people for substance abuse and addiction. It's that type of anger I have that's motivating me here. But also, too, there is a compassion and love that I'm trying to hang on to. But I see what happens. I see what happens with this Manchin-Schumer climate change suicide pact, as it's been so brilliantly described, this giveaway to the oil and gas companies where we may get some oil, we may get some solar and wind, we may get some more electric cars, but it comes at the expense of doubling the acreage we give to oil and gas companies every year on land. 60 million acres on our waters are going to go to oil and gas companies every year. I mean, this is, again, a suicide pact. It is just branding and marketing done to make sure that Joe Biden somehow will be more successful. He and his party will be more successful in the midterms, but it is all so cynical. It is obscene, and it is leading, or not leading to, because we are already in ruin. It's continuing in that ruin, and it's disgusting that people are cheering it on, making it out as this is some great win when they all know the biggest win in that package is for the oil and gas companies, for Joe Manchin's friends. So it's that type of that's what's fueling me. And that's why if I go there, I'm sure I've said this before, Sabrina, but like if I go there, they're not getting their $15 billion aircraft carriers, certainly if our people don't have health care, so that's what's motivating me.
Awesome. Are there any other organizations aside from Green Party? Are there any other organizations that you're a part of, I guess, outside of the Green Party? And also, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about running as a third party candidate?
Right. Yeah. So I've been a member of Veterans for Peace for a long time. I am a member of a number of different boards, like World Beyond War, Expose Facts, Veteran Intelligent Professionals for Sanity, a number of different local organizations working with the homeless. And then I've been a member of a think tank for 12 years now. I guess I've been with the think tank, Center for International Policy up in DC. Look it up. We don't take corporate donations. That's why we often run out of we can't pay our rent. We're an anti-war think tank, a pro-human rights think tank, one of the few in Washington, D.C. that does that type of work. We really stand apart from the think tanks that are nothing more than mouthpieces for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in their guise as the parties of war and Wall Street. We definitely fall in parallel with a think tank like IPS, Institute for Policy Studies, or National Priorities Project, or in some ways with the new Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. And in terms of what I would say to somebody who is looking to do this, first of all, I'll say, hey, get in contact with me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Love to share what I've learned. I'm a first-time political candidate. I've made a ton of mistakes. If I had a time machine, man, I'd be stepping into that thing every day, right? You know, but the thing about it is that, you know, build your team, go into this with the mindset that, yeah, you're not going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're not going to be able to do it the way the Republicans, Democrats do it, but that's why you're doing this. Right. And just have everything with looking at our example or Jill Stein's example, they are going to come after you. So you have to have everything tight, right? You have to make sure all your T's are crossed, I's are dotted, because they will come after you. And then just get out there and use what's driving you. Look, you're not running, if you're running as a Green or you're running with PSL or Socialist Alternatives or anyone else, you're not going to be running because you think this is some type of way to the big bucks, right? This is going to be arduous. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be very stressful. It's good. You're not going to be able to, it's going to cause severe hardship on you and your family as you do this. But remember why you're doing it, right? Who you're doing it for. And that's what I can say about the people who are part of the North Carolina Green Party, the people who are on my campaign. We're all doing it because of the people we love. And that's why we're doing it. Otherwise, we'd be in the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or we wouldn't be doing it at all.
Awesome. Matthew, before you go, where can people find you? MatthewHoferSenate.org. If people can support us, donate, encourage others to donate. Again, we've got 2 lawsuits we're fighting down here, as well as we've got to run a campaign. So if people can help, I really appreciate it. And Sabrina, thank you so much for your time and for everything that you're doing. Thanks so much for coming on.
You bet. You have a good night.
You too.
All right, bye.
All right, guys, that was Matthew Hoh. If you are just joining, he's running for U.S. Senate. He's from North Carolina, and he's running through the Green Party. So definitely check out that website. You guys, he gave some good advice there. So definitely check that out.